We're good? Great. Young people are often described as the future, but in Ecuador, the future is arriving fast as climate change accelerates. Yet young Ecuadorians are being blocked from shaping this future. My name's Kyle. With me is, thanks, G, Sophie, and Claire. And for our global policy project, we partnered with Fundación Esquel, Ecuador's largest nonprofit, to better understand how youth age 18 to 29 engage on water issues. Today, we are very excited to share with you the results from this project entitled Empowering Youth in Sustainable Water Resource Management in Ecuador's Central Highlands. We'll begin with an overview of our research objective, the methods we used, and contextual information related to water management in Ecuador. Next, we'll present our research findings. Then we'll share our proposed program, which is really at the heart of today's presentation. And finally, we'll close with some key takeaways and open the floor to questions. Our team's objective was to propose a project that democratizes water governance by making it inclusive across generations. In response, we designed a program for rural youth that bring together training in sustainable water management and a paid internship with their local water boards. This allows them to participate meaningfully in the decisions that impact water in their communities. This program design is based on research that we conducted during 2 weeks of fieldwork in Ecuador's Central Highlands last November. Our primary research included 15 interviews with 21 stakeholders across the academic, government, nonprofit, and private sectors, as well as a focus group with 12 youth leaders. These took place both in the capital, Quito, as well as in 2 locations in Chimborazo, which is a predominantly rural province in the Central Highlands and is highlighted in dark green on the map. In Chimborazo, we visited the small town of Riobamba and the town of Guano, which is also indicated with stars on the map. And then to complement this primary research, we conducted an extensive literature review and a case study analysis. And now I'll pass it to G to provide a bit more background on this information.
Thank you, Kyle. The Central Highlands of Ecuador are a mountain region with high altitude grasslands known as paramos, play a critical role in water management. The paramo acts like sponges, storing water and slowly releasing it into the river that supply around 100 million people living around downstream in Ecuador. And now close Andes. This has made the Central Highlands an important geographical areas for water resource management in the country. In Ecuador, the national government is automatically responsible for providing water, which is human right recognized in the Constitution. However, the management of water is decentralized. In rural areas, water governance is managed through 2 types of local water boards. The first one is Junta de Agua. They manage potable water, and Junta de Riego manage irrigation water. These boards are made up of elected community members who oversee water distribution. They are emerged as grassroots response to the need for local control over water resources, especially in rural areas where state service has been limited or inconsistent. Today, although these water boards are community-run, they are recognized through Ecuador's water law. As of 2022, 75% of people in urban areas have access to safely managed drinking water, while only 53% do in rural areas. This highlights an existing urban-rural disparities and an urgent need to improve water service delivery. Improving access to water can be difficult, as population growth and economic development in the country have put increasing pressure on national water supply. I will now pass on to Sophie and Claire, who will discuss our field finding in more detail.
We've decided to showcase our high-level research findings through a problem tree, where the trunk in the center represents the core problem, the tree roots on the bottom represent contributing factors to the problem, and the leaves on the top represent the consequences of the problem. We see two interconnected problems emerging from our research. The first is related to water resource management, where there is a water crisis, and the second is the lack of youth engagement within the water space to manage this crisis. Starting with a core contributing factor to the water crisis, we frequently heard throughout our interviews that a source of water problems in Ecuador is a lack of integration across levels of government, sectors, and knowledge systems. For example, one academic mentioned how every institution passes the responsibility of water management from local onto provincial, onto national, and then back again, suggesting inadequate coordination and dialogue between water sector actors. Another frequently cited concern among interviewees was the limited financial and human resources available for water governance. This appears to be especially true at the local level and in rural areas where, for instance, the water boards that Xi just described are sometimes unable to provide continuous services to users. This often means that dedicating resources to conservation and adaptation is out of the question. Yet climate impacts and other human-induced stresses are putting, increasing stress on water. When we were in Ecuador in November, the country was facing its worst drought in 60 years. And because it relies heavily on hydroelectric power, water shortages led to blackouts lasting up to 14 hours a day for several months. Interviewees also described a shrinking supply of drinking water from aquifers and glacier melt on the iconic Mount Chimborazo. Just months later, intense rainfalls caused flash floods and landslides that have destroyed critical infrastructure and killed 22 people so far this year. Not only climate change, but agricultural expansion by rural communities into the Paramo ecosystem is a source of pressure on water supplies, impacting the soil's ability to filter and distribute water to downstream communities. This shows the need for alternative economic opportunities for rural communities that don't interfere with the functioning of the Paramo ecosystem. These water challenges have clear implications for individual health and economic livelihoods. Interviewees pointed to elevated rates of childhood malnutrition due to inadequate access to clean water and sanitation. Additionally, lower crop yields have led to reduced profits for farmers, threatening food security in the long term. Ecuador's economy has also suffered an estimated $2 billion in drought-related losses last year. And I'll now pass it on to Claire, who will discuss the other side of our problem tree.
So through our research, we found that there's a gap between how decision makers view youth and how youth see their own role in water governance. One elected official told us that young people don't care about water issues because they only care about studying, playing, partying. This sentiment reflects a broader theme of those in power overlooking young people as legitimate change makers, whether due to perceived disinterest in water issues or because they see young people caring more about other issues like employment and personal safety. However, what we heard from youth told a different story. Youth focus group participants shared that they are motivated to act on climate and water issues, with one person saying that they act so that future generations can live without catastrophe. There were also some non-youth interviewees who confirmed that youth they interact with care deeply about environmental issues. Rather than a lack of interest then, we understood that there's a lack of opportunity for youth participation in water governance. One focus group member noted that in general, there is scarce inclusion of young people in decision-making spaces. In some cases, the exclusion is not intentional, but more of an institutional problem. For example, land ownership is required to be a voting member on water boards, but a lot of youth don't own land. Youth migration was also frequently discussed as a barrier to youth involvement in water governance, especially in rural areas. In rural areas, young people frequently leave their communities in search of more rewarding economic opportunities in urban areas and abroad, which means that they're less likely to participate in water boards. Overall, we found that two key consequences stem from this lack of youth involvement in water management. First, it can reduce innovation, with one elected official noting that it can be difficult to work with adults who generally don't have that vision, whereas young people may introduce new ways of seeing and doing things. Additionally, limited youth integration also reduces intergenerational knowledge sharing, which may have consequences in the future if youth are not equipped to take a leadership role in water spaces, especially with increasing pressures on water systems due to climate change.
Thanks, Claire. I'll now summarize our findings that were in the problem tree. First, limited institutional capacity is making sustainable water management more difficult. Second, climate change and human impacts are interfering with sustainable water management. And lastly, youth face a mix of both social and economic barriers to engage in sustainable water management, even though they're motivated to contribute. With these findings in mind, we developed the Jóvenes y Juntas de Agua program, which translates to youth and local water boards. The theory of change underlying this program is if youth have the opportunities to develop the skills and knowledge and leadership in water resource management, and their perspectives are integrated into decision-making, then water management will become more equitable, sustainable, and intergenerational. The overall goal of this program is to empower rural youth in Chimborazo to take on active roles in these local water boards, the juntas, by leading very needed efforts towards climate resilience in their own communities. The first half of this program aims to equip youth with the skills and knowledge through a training course where they participate in field visits with local partners. Working with these partners would foster dialogue on the crucial local knowledge needed for climate adaptation. The course would cover paramo management, community stakeholder engagement, as well as emphasize leadership and administrative skills. Now moving to the second component of the program, it's for youth to complete a 6-month internship with their local water boards. This would provide mentorship and direct employment opportunity for youth, while also increasing the representation in these water boards. By being able to apply their new knowledge on sustainable water practices, youth are in a direct position to help these local water boards better fight future floods and droughts. Through skills-based training and real-world experience, our suggested program builds mutually beneficial connections, bridges knowledge gaps, and integrates youth perspectives into the decision-making process.
From what youth told us, they are deeply worried about the climate crisis and the direction their communities are headed. At the same time, they feel powerless to act on it. Youth are full of energy and fresh ideas for tackling complex problems, but are met with adults who are reluctant to integrate them into decision-making spaces where they can have high impact. If we keep excluding youth, Ecuador faces the risk of failed climate adaptation, a widening leadership gap, and the loss of valuable local knowledge. But if we engage them now, we can build stronger communities that are ready to address the inevitable floods and droughts that will continue to happen. Our program has the opportunity to build spaces for young people to learn, lead, and protect the future of their communities. The implementation of this program invests not only in the potential of youth, but in a better future for everyone. Thank you.
Hello. Now we are welcoming the client. The client is the Esquel Foundation. As the team said, the largest foundation in Ecuador doing development in general. We have Shakira Galarza and Boris Cornejo is also joined. Boris Cornejo is the founding president, executive president of Fundación Esquel. So let's hear from you. Any comments, questions? You have the first round of questions, Shakira. Oh, and Maria Fernanda Calderon is joining also. Veronica Lopez, the whole team. A round of applause. Thank you. So who wants to start? You're the client. You have the first word.
Okay, should I start?
Yes.
Well,
You have the first word, Boris.
of reflections and also a question. But first of all, I would like to thanks and congratulate for such a interesting piece of work. There is a lot of information. I appreciate very much all the findings and also the methodology used for the development of this proposal or initiative. The reflection is that it seems to me that we have to do something with the local structures dealing with the water issues or problems. So it seems to me that we can promote the participation of young people in the process of the management of the water system and provisions. But if we don't do something with the local structures, I mean the current governance, the institutional settings that we have developed over the years, there is not going to be the openness for the incorporation of young people in the process. So we have to do something in terms of changing the minds and also the designs of the local structures in order to open doors for the participation of young people. So do you have any sort of ideas about what we can do in order to change the minds of the old structures, which means also the local leaderships, which indeed have a power in the management of the water provision? So that's a first question, no? I mean, what we can do in order to change the current structures.
Probably we go another round with Veronica or Shakira. Any, or Fer?
Yes, actually we have. Thank you so much for this opportunity to also address to such an important information that we received. And actually we have two questions. So the first one is regarding some specifications that are written in the first part of the report. In one of the insights, the team points that is really important, this problem regarding the lack of aid, of international aid, but also the lack of resources that can fund these kind of activities and these kind of projects in general. So we wanted to get more information, and maybe because for us it's really important in this current context that we are facing right now, because of the cuts of funding for the international cooperation and in general for the development of different projects. So what do you think, guys, we could do regarding this specific point, the specific line of funds in order to work in these sort of topics? And that's all. This is the first one.
The first one, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and congrats for all the team about this research. And the third one is about the experience and the good practices that you search that in the report. You said about the 3 projects that are interesting because can support the idea of this proposal that you present now. So what do you think, which one is the best, and about the innovation and that it could be useful for this proposal? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your questions. I think I will start by answering the first two as best as I can, and then I'll hand it over to Sophie to address the third question, Farah's question, and Kyle, if there's anything additional to add. On the first question around the need to reform local water governance within the water boards before involving youth, I think this is a really good point. And I think, like, in a sense, the reform of these institutions was maybe a little bit beyond the scope of this project. However, we do feel that there, at least in the water board officials that we spoke with, there is a willingness to engage young people. And so I think we really see this as something where it maybe starts with a few boards who are willing and open to including youth, and then ideally, the other boards kind of see the benefits that are gained through the inclusion of youth. Because one of our kind of goals with this program is not just that youth are learning from people who have worked in the water sector and worked on these boards for a long time, but also that youth are receiving training and kind of like cutting edge climate training that they can help integrate into the board structures. In addition, administrative skills. We heard frequently that there's, mismanagement of finances within these boards, and also like just a general lack of capacity. So we really see this program as, a sell it, not an easy sell, perhaps a difficult sell, but there's a lot for the boards themselves to gain in the design of the program, because youth are coming with these climate adaptation skills, these administrative and bookkeeping skills to help increase the capacity of the board. So I guess it's a bit of a bottom-up approach to kind of transforming these boards internally. Yes.
Question. Yeah, thank you for your question, Boris. What I also heard was a question around changing minds. And we see youth as a real tremendous opportunity to share information across communities. We learned about the perspective of new rurality in rural communities, where it's not just this ultra-agricultural ways that we imagine rural communities in Latin America. It's changing. It's becoming the access to technology is growing. For example, between 2018 and 2024, rural internet access grew from 16% to 48%. And so although we recognize maybe social media isn't the best place to ensure that correct climate information is shared, we do see it as this opportunity to make sure that even in rural communities, youth can share their information and their knowledge across their communities.
Sophie? I think Sophie wanted to say something.
All right. I'll try to address the lack of aid question, which I know is on everyone's mind. And maybe I'll answer it specifically to the context of our proposed program. We know that Esquel has identified a potential funder for this type of program. And so our feeling is that in this space where there's very limited funding, the way that Esquel and other organizations can shine is by best aligning the programs that they're proposing to the funders with what the funders are looking for. I mean, it kind of seems obvious, but for example, one funder that we've kind of tailored the language of our report to, they have a large focus on intersectionality and on gender as well. And while gender wasn't actually something that we really asked about in our interviews, it actually came up really frequently, where people would talk about the disparities in, household labor and just general economic disparities between men and women. And especially in the context of water, when men migrate to the cities to find work, it's often women who are left behind to maintain, the land and to engage with the water boards. But it can be difficult for them to do so because ownership is in their husband's name, and therefore they can't exercise that kind of voting power within the water board. So all that to say is that we think that in order to propose a program that really aligns with the funders' interests, we've tried to incorporate that gender lens into our programming. So one of the ways we've done that is by including an indicator, a success indicator where we're aiming to have 50% of participants in the program be women. Another way that we're doing that is by designing the program in a way that it's very flexible to especially women's schedules. And so I think by really trying to appeal to what these funders are looking for, that'll kind of put Esquel in a good position to receive that funding when there's so many other people out there also trying to kind of fight for that. So that would be my take on that, but
Thank you.
I'll pass it to Sophie to address the third question.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Fair, for that question. So yeah, we did do a case study analysis, which we mentioned. Thanks, Carl. Yeah, these were the 3 case studies that we narrowed it down to, and they're all what they share in common is that they connect youth in water governance initiatives. And I won't go into each point, but what makes them also unique or innovative and distinct from one another is, a range of factors. For one being their location. So one of the case studies is in the BC context. Another case study is a different province in Ecuador. And a third one is actually part of a transnational partnership between Ecuador, Bolivia, and Peru. They all address water issues, and they all bring in youth in some way. And some other instances of how they differ is their broader goals and visions and activities. So again, the one, for instance, in BC, focuses a lot more on supporting youth to overcome climate anxiety and to help them in career opportunities in the blue and green economy is the language that they use. And one of the other case studies focuses particularly on addressing gender discrimination, so empowering women in leadership and administrative roles as it relates to really localized or hyper-localized water community governance with water. And then the third one is, focuses more on the connection between food security and water. So that's how they differ. And from the case studies, we also developed 7 best practices as well to help guide our program design.
Thank you, Sophie. And we have the second priority to our faculty lead, Atieh. Please. A question, comment? Really quick one. We have time? Yeah. Good.
Thank you. Fascinating presentation. Well done. So my question is about, can you walk us through an example of how a specific insight from your fieldwork interviews influenced one of your program's activities or outcomes? And specifically, I would love to hear more about how your team translated those real-world voices into your design decisions.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Atieh. Essentially, this question of how did we go from these case studies and the data from our interviews into our program? And yeah, it was tough. Since we are proposing a program and not a policy recommendation, we weren't able to follow the same sort of blueprint as I think a lot of our other groups did. And so it did take some trial and error, but the process that we landed on is that from, as Sophie was mentioning, these case studies, we developed 7 best practices that were shared across these great examples. And then in analyzing our interview data, we developed these 9 insights that were shared across different stakeholder groups. And so from there, we cross-referenced them, and it became really apparent that the training on these key skills that we'd highlighted, as well as this paid internship, were these commonalities across the data that we had had from our conversations, as well as some of the literature review. And maybe an example of this is why paid interviews, the paid part, is really integral into the success of our program, because what we had heard from both these case studies and our interviewees is that youth, although are motivated by climate action, also have economic needs that they also need satisfied. And so this is kind of how we were able to transition and a bit of an insight into our process.
Thank you so much. And do we have we have one more question for the audience. Just time for that. Sorry. Any pressing question? Yeah, Maha, please.
Hi, great presentation. I was just curious to know why you want to focus specifically on rural youth in your program.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Maha. So a question on why youth and why rural youth. So I mean, the first thing to share is that, being candid, it was something that was really important to Esquel, that we really focused on youth. But the more that we dove into this content, the more that we saw this as like this really tremendous opportunity. I mean, as our graphic shows here, 50% of youth, the light blue and the yellow, 50% of rather people in Ecuador are under the age of 29. So it's obviously a very young population. Specifically around why rural youth, we did go back and forth of whether we wanted to focus on urban youth or rural youth, but really as these rural communities are at the source, the water source, the literal water source of these watersheds, we recognize it's integral to include them in these conversations and conservation efforts. And I'll see if I can find, well, there's another stat that we saw from a study that was conducted within the last year, where 60% of rural youth anticipate the need to migrate due to fear of the effects of climate change. And so again, we're seeing rural youth being aware of these issues and motivated to act. And so that's, yeah, why we chose rural youth.
Thank you so much. Any last word, Veronica? You didn't have a chance to say anything. Any last word to your team here?
Hi. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Quito, Ecuador. First, I want to congratulate the students. Everything is clear to me, so thank you for this presentation. No more.
So thanks for Esquel Foundation for the trust in us. And thank you for a wonderful team, Kyle, Visvanathan, Sophie, Groll, Claire, McPhee, and Fang. Please